Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest puzzles of modern life, addiction. I mean, think about it. We have more access to pleasure than ever before, right? Yet, a lot of us seem to be more miserable. So, we're going to break down the science behind why we get hooked, and way more importantly, how we can actually find our way back to some balance. So, let's just jump right in with a question. What in the world could a late-night video game binge, getting lost in romance novels for hours, and something as serious as opioids, what could they possibly have in common? I mean, on the surface, they seem like they're from different planets. But it turns out they all plug into the exact same ancient wiring in our brains. And to get a handle on that wiring, I want you to picture a seesaw in your brain, a pleasure-pain balance. And its only job, its entire purpose, is to stay level. That level state is something scientists call homeostasis. Pretty much every single thing we experience, from eating a cookie to scrolling our phones, tips this seesaw one way or the other. Now, the star player in this whole system is a chemical messenger called dopamine. You've probably heard it called the pleasure molecule, right? Well, that's not quite the whole story. Dopamine is really about motivation. It's the chemical that screams, "Go get that thing." It's all about anticipation and desire. And the amount of dopamine something releases is pretty much a direct measure of how addictive it could be.
Okay, so here's the problem, and it's a huge one. We have a major mismatch. Our brains were built for a world of scarcity, where rewards were few and far between and took a ton of work to get. But today, we're living in a world of just overwhelming abundance. Some people call it limbic capitalism. Basically, a whole economy has figured out how to poke our primitive, emotional limbic brain with an endless supply of high dopamine stuff, 24/7, right on our screens.
So, with all this pleasure, how does the brain pay the bill? Well, it follows a rule called the opponent process theory. And it's simple, really. For every bit of pleasure that tips the seesaw to one side, the brain immediately creates an equal and opposite reaction toward pain to level it back out. It's a law of nature, really. What goes up must come down.
But this is where the trap is sprung. When we keep hitting that pleasure button over and over again, the brain adapts. The pain side of the seesaw gets stronger. It gets faster. Think of it like little gremlins populating the pain side, and every time you seek pleasure, they get bigger and they bring their friends. This whole process is called neuroadaptation, and it's exactly why we build up a tolerance. Suddenly, you need more and more of whatever it is just to feel normal, just to get that seesaw back to level.
And this leads to a really devastating paradox. The nonstop chase for intense pleasure actually ends up robbing us of our ability to enjoy any pleasure at all. There's a clinical term for this, anhedonia. The simple joys, a beautiful sunset, a great chat with a friend, even a delicious meal, they just don't move the needle anymore because our pleasure balance is stuck, weighed down on the side of pain.
So what about that intense feeling of craving? What's really driving that? It's not just remembering how good the reward feels. There's a classic experiment with rats that shows this perfectly. A light flashes, which tells the rat that cocaine is coming. And boom, dopamine spikes just in anticipation. But then, watch this. Right after that signal, the dopamine level plummets below the normal baseline. That short, sharp, painful drop, that is the biological engine of craving. It's that powerful, urgent feeling to do something, anything, to make that deficit go away. Okay, so that's a pretty grim picture, right? It sounds like our brains are basically pre-wired to get stuck in this loop. But here's the good news. If we can understand the trap, we can also figure out how to escape it. We can learn how to restore our natural balance. The very first step, and look, this is a tough one, but it is absolutely non-negotiable, is abstinence. You have to give the brain a break. A period of at least a month without that high dopamine thing allows that seesaw to slowly, carefully reset itself. It lets those super strong gremlins on the pain side finally shrink, giving your natural reward system a chance to actually come back online.
But just deciding to stop in a world that's constantly tempting us, that's usually not enough. We need actual strategies. And one of the most powerful ones is called self-binding. It's basically the practice of intentionally putting up walls, both real, physical walls and mental ones, between ourselves and our drug of choice. And this breaks down into a really practical toolkit with 3 main types. Physical binding is all about space, literally making something harder to get to. Chronological is about time, setting strict rules like no social media before 9 a.m. And categorical is about meaning,
figuring out and then avoiding the very specific triggers that send you down that rabbit hole.
All right, now for a really fascinating and kind of counterintuitive strategy, what if instead of always chasing pleasure, we could get our balance back by intentionally pressing on the pain side? This idea is called hormesis, and it's all about using short-term, manageable stressors to wake up the brain's own powerful reward systems.
This quote from a patient talking about ice water immersion therapy, it just captures the feeling perfectly. It's that initial shock, right? That moment of intense discomfort where every fiber of your being is telling you to get out. But what happens if you can just push through that moment? Well, the payoff is absolutely incredible, and the science is stunning. Plunging into cold water causes a massive 250% increase in dopamine. But here's the key. Unlike the sharp spike and crash from a drug, this rise in dopamine is slow, it's steady, and it lasts for hours with no crash. You're basically teaching your brain how to make its own good feelings again by overcoming a healthy challenge.
But, our brains don't just exist in a vacuum. The chemistry is only half the story. Addiction also gets its power from this really destructive psychological loop. Overconsumption makes us feel shame. That shame makes us want to hide what we're doing, so we lie, and the lying leads to isolation, which just makes us want to escape even more. And the cycle starts all over again. So, how in the world do you break a cycle like that? The antidote is something called radical honesty. It's about telling the truth, not just when you're doing well, but especially about the struggles and the slip-ups. Because when you stop lying, you completely break the power that shame has over you. It opens the door for real human connection, and that connection is one of the most powerful forces for recovery there is. So let's bring it all home with the 4 crucial lessons of the balance. First, chasing pleasure relentlessly, ironically, leads to pain. Second, real recovery has to start with abstinence to let your brain's baseline reset. Third, strategies like self-binding are pretty much essential tools for surviving in our modern world. And finally, number 4, embracing healthy challenges can actually restore your brain's natural ability to feel good. And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. We're living in a world that is practically engineered to hijack our brain's reward system. The temptations, they aren't going anywhere. So the real challenge for every single one of us is to decide, consciously and with intention, how we're going to choose to find and maintain our own balance.